Hello and good evening and welcome to the 2021 York Festival of Ideas. My name is Joan Concannon and I'm the co-founding director of the festival. This is a fantastic launch event showcasing some of the most ambitious and diverse subject matter that we've ever attempted. But first, a few technical notices. If you're watching live, you can ask questions using the Q&A button on your screen. This is available throughout the event, so questions can be asked at any time. Should you have technical issues, such as the loss of Wi-Fi, you can rejoin the event using the original link. Please also remember that today's event is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch again on our YouTube video, York Ideas, and please do share the link with all of your friends. Subtitles are available in this event. To turn these on or off, use the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your screen. Now, as the old adage goes, time flies when you're having fun, and it is hard to believe that a decade has passed since the festival began as a small but perfectly formed collection of events into the hundreds of talks and exhibitions and performances and tours that now form one of the largest free festivals in the UK. The York Festival of Ideas was founded and is led by the University of York, a university that believes in its responsibility to deliver social and public benefit, that our work should make the world a better place. We also believe that our students and our staff are citizens of the world, and that research and ideas are the binding glue that can make society better for all of us. So creating a York Festival of Ideas is foregrounded in our belief that everyone across the globe should have free access to ideas, as well as an opportunity to learn, explore, and discuss diverse ideas and lived experiences and different opinions in a safe and welcoming environment. This evening's event, She Energy, Women as Creators, is the third of three fantastic launch events that have taken place today. And we're now going to be joined by a fantastic array of international musicians, writers, and poets to celebrate the energy and empathy of women's creativity. This event includes the premiere of a new piece filmed in the glorious setting of York Minster, and I'm really indebted to York Minster for their incredible generosity in allowing us to film in such a wonderful space, emblematic of the city of York being the UK's first human rights city of sanctuary. And above all, I'm so grateful to all the incredible women on tonight's panel and everyone who participated, particularly our students in the film, especially Anna Phoebe, whose inspiring music provides such a magnificent soundscape for tonight's event. It's now my pleasure to introduce our chair for this evening, Helen Smith, who is Professor of Renaissance Literature and Head of the Department of English and Related Literature at the University of York, obviously the best English department in the world. So Helen is going to introduce our speakers today and to lead some discussion and questions from the audience. Helen, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Joan. And I want to start this evening by saying extremely hearty thanks to Joan and to the whole events team for the extraordinary work that goes into the Festival of Ideas each year and the incredible energy and verve that they have brought to this year's online festival and this wonderful event in particular. As women creators go, Joan and her team are really a powerhouse group, and I'm very grateful to them for bringing this superb panel and brilliant creative opportunity together. I also want to thank you, our audience, for being here, wherever you're watching from and whenever you're watching. And I want to thank all those who participated in creating tonight's premiere and making it possible, especially, as Joan says, acclaimed violinist and composer Anna Phoebe, who's produced an extraordinary performance for us, exploring themes of hope, creativity, connectivity and expression as we look forward and begin to imagine new futures. The performance, which receives its premiere at the end of today's panel discussion, powerfully weaves together original music and contributions of poetry from an array of South Asian and British writers, creating a mesmerising tapestry. I want to note, and we have made this clear on our holding slide, that the extraordinary moving work we're going to experience tonight touches on some vitally important, but also potentially very distressing themes, including sexual violence and other violence against women. We may also touch on a number of these themes during our panel discussion. So please do take good care of yourself if these themes are likely to prove particularly challenging for you this evening. And I want to thank our partners too for this event, Dakar Litfest, Jaipur Literature Festival and York Minster. It's a tremendous privilege this evening to share the Zoom stage with 5 extraordinary panellists. I have a number of questions to ask our panellists, and I'm sure the conversation will unfold in exciting ways. But please do feel free to add your own questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You can click on that and pop in any questions that you have, I'll weave them into the conversation as best I can. And I know that even if we don't quite have time for all of your questions this evening, our panelists will really appreciate seeing and thinking with your responses in the days ahead. So I will now introduce our panelists. I'll do it very briefly, but you can see fuller biographies and links to some of our panelists' work on the event page for tonight's event, and find out more about the incredible creativity of the women we've brought together this evening. Salena Godden is a poet, author, activist and broadcaster, as well as an essayist and memoirist. She's published several volumes of poetry, and her debut novel, Mrs. Death, you have to see it written down, I think, was published earlier this year. Jasmin Kaur is a writer, illustrator and poet living on unceded Stolo territory. Her writing explores themes of feminism, womanhood, social justice and love, acting as a means of healing and reclaiming identity. J.A. Mensah is a prose and theatre writer and lecturer in our own Department of English and Related Literature here at the University of York. Her debut novel, Castles from Cobwebs, won the inaugural Northbound Book Award and has been longlisted for the Desmond Elliott Prize. Anna Phoebe is a violinist and composer working on cross-genre collaborative projects. She will release her solo album Horizons, Inspired by the Sea, later this year. And Sadaf Saaz is a poet, writer, entrepreneur, molecular biologist and women's rights advocate. She is a co-founder, director and producer at Dhaka Litfest. So without further ado, let me invite our panelists to turn on their cameras and to unmute themselves and to join me for this evening's discussion. Welcome, everyone. And thank you so much for being here. So as you know, I'm going to dive in and ask Anna, first of all, to talk briefly about the inspiration and the thought that went into creating the piece we're going to enjoy at the end of this moment. Why she energy and why now, I suppose?
Well, I think, first of all, it's really been an incredible journey. And I have to say a massive thank you to Joan Concannon, who kind of is the kind of woman who is brilliant at taking a seed and just letting it fulfill its potential and kind of just going with any kind of idea that you come up with. So really, this was a truly collaborative project with you guys at York University. And it started, I guess, the seed was a collaboration I did with Salena Godden last year, in just at the beginning of lockdown and the beginning of the pandemic. And we wanted to do something together, I guess, to kind of process what was going on. And I'd written some music to kind of process my own emotions. And Salena sent me a poem, a reading of her poem. And she had managed to put into words how I was feeling. And she'd managed to process, you know, everything that I was feeling, but put it into this incredible, insightful, moving, you know, hair-raising poem. And it was just this experience of collaborating with someone who stretches what you do outside of your own parameters. And we've kind of been working together and become friends. We've never really met properly and face to face, and we've kind of started working together. So I guess doing something with her was definitely the seed of tonight. And we came up with this idea of creating a tapestry of music and poetry and reaching out to female poets across the globe to talk about some of the themes that inspire their work. And I have to say, Sarah Mitchell, who brought these women, you know, on board, it's been absolutely a humbling experience to see, to see what some women face with just as a creator themselves, and you're probably going to go into that. So really this came about a truly collaborative process, and it's about exploring themes of feminism, social activism, sexual violence against women. And I guess my job as the composer and as a performer is to provide a support for that narrative and to allow it to be experienced in a different way. So yeah,
I imagine that has everyone really looking forward, but it's also given us a lovely jumping off point, I think, in a question that I'd love to ask, and perhaps Salena would open us out with this one, and others might feel free to come in, which is, I suppose, about collaboration and how far that is important to your work, and how far you feel there is something specifically sexed or gendered. There is something about women's collaboration that might be particularly powerful, or that you might find particularly rewarding or important to your work as creators.
Hello everyone. So I think, my collaboration with Anna Phoebe is very unusual in that we never really have met or like drank a bottle of wine or kind of hung out, but we act like we have. by just sharing music and poems with each other over the internet all through lockdown. We were scheduled to work together, and then COVID happened, and we thought, well, let's just keep going anyway with some of the ideas that we were having. And so I would kind of record some poetry and then send it to Anna, and Anna would set that to music. And it was like a conversation with my words and her music, and it was just just amazing. And I really enjoyed the whole process of working like that. And also, you know, this kind of language of the way women work and create together. It's a beautiful thing. And and I'm really excited to see what Anna's done for has recorded in the cathedral. I think it's just amazing. Yeah.
And Sadaf, I wonder whether you would want to jump in, as I know your own practice, there's been collaboration there, but also that you've very much used your work as a way of creating a platform for collaborations and as a way of bringing people together in really interesting ways. Is that something that has been a conscious part of your own practice, or something that's been particularly important to you?
I think it's been essential to the way I've developed. I think in what has really given me a lot of joy and really kind of I guess gets my connections going is putting powerful creative people together and coming up with something that one would never envisage would happen. And so I've been kind of doing that for many years as a curator, and had kept my I think personal poetry and writing. I felt I'd kind of kept it apart from that. But what I realized that both are extremely integral, not only to what I do, but the way I also kind of relate to other people. And I think that some people think that to be a curator or to produce, you are kind of then promoting other people or like that is what is satisfying you. But what I realized that it kind of makes me whole. And I think it even kind of feeds into my life as well. So maybe my life has probably been very unconventional from the beginning. But I think even when you're trying to weave your own path throughout life, and you're trying to sort of stand up and do things that are kind of overtly kind of not what one should do, that is also kind of a way of like reimagining where you actually the direction you should be going. So I'm actually finding that where I thought that things were very discreet in my life for many years, and it was kind of like, okay, when am I going to grow up and kind of figure out what I want to do with my life? I realized that it's kind of coalesced into kind of completely making sense now.
No, that's incredible. And I suppose you also gave us something to touch on in that I think it's lovely to be starting with a celebration of women's collaborations and the kind of energy that's created and released there. But I know we also want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that women face, I suppose, both in collaborations and in terms of your sense of the sense that creativity can be transgressive, that the idea that you are having to stand up and do things that are not what is expected, and really kind of put that you are all writers who have in one way or another kind of put yourselves forward and had the courage to make your voices heard. And I wonder if you would feel you could reflect a little bit on some of the challenges that you faced that have either contributed to or inhibited in some ways your creative work. And I should have warned you, Jasmin, sorry, that I would like to come to you first with that question before I posed it, but I wonder if you'd be willing to start us off.
Yeah, I would love to. So my journey as a poet and as an artist has very much come up through the internet, through social media. I started back in like 2011, 2012, writing poetry and performing spoken word poetry that was meant to be read out loud in front of audiences. But at the same time, I was of that generation that was watching spoken word on YouTube and sharing poetry on Instagram and so on. And back in those days, I was so excited to jump on the internet and to share my poetry, because it almost felt as though the internet offered this level playing field and this fair landscape where all of us could share our work freely without a gatekeeper deciding that our work was worthy of being shared or read. And I loved Instagram because it was just this positive space where I could put up a poem and send it off into the world, and someone somewhere in some place in the world would find it and connect with it and And that was just so remarkable and amazing to me. And I think that as social media evolved through tech companies and through capitalist like interests, and also just through how the internet is, social media isn't always like the friendliest, nicest place in the world for creators. I think that trolling has been like a really big challenge for me, just in terms of like people just leaving like unkind comments when they don't like something. And I think that like the internet, it creates this space sometimes where anonymity leads to people feeling entitled to just be cruel. And that's the strange thing about working on the internet. It's like you're out there, you know, sharing your work, but there's people watching who you can't see and who you can't really interact with in a normal way. And I think that sometimes in those in-person art spaces, like open mics and like art spaces in person, we have like a little more connectivity and humanness. And I think that's been like my big challenge, just like dealing with like both the humanity and inhumanity of the internet. And also really missing in-person art spaces, especially in the era of COVID when all of us are kind of like behind screens now. There's like so much beauty in being able to connect across seas and across the world, but also so many barriers as well that come up that we put in front of each other as human beings.
Yes, and of course, if anybody does want to pick up on any of the themes that people are bringing in, both in the audience, if you want to pop a question in the Q&A, I'm very happy to take a look at that and throw it in. And of course, if our panelists, if anyone wants to jump in and just wave at me and signal if there's something that you want to push forward with as well. I suppose what I was partly thinking about when you were talking, Jasmin, is the very famous quote from Virginia Woolf about women needing a room of one's own and £500 a year. And in a sense, that's all that's needed for women to be able to actually relax and allow themselves to create. And I wonder, this is a big question, and I'll put it to Juliana first, but if anyone else has good ideas, Salena might add a bottle of wine to that list possibly, but I wonder what's the equivalent nowadays? Is this about connectivity and about certain kinds of fuel? Is this it's still about economic independence? What is our £500 a year in a room of one's own?
That is a huge question. I think the money and space are still very much needed. And in the UK, in the creative economy, it feels like there have been lots of conversations about the gig economy in recent years. But I feel like as a freelancer working in the arts, or I'm no longer a freelancer, but until very recently, I was a freelancer working in the arts in the UK. We have been working in the gig economy for decades. And people are often surviving from one project to the next. And I don't think it necessarily allows them to really develop and take risks, because they feel as though there's not the space to get it wrong, and particularly as women, and sometimes particularly as Black women, as a Black woman as well. So I think enough money to survive and some space to take creative risks is still something that's desperately needed. Just touching on some things that other people have said, when Sadaf said about being creative and wondering when you're going to grow up and start doing something serious, that really resonated with me. I think there's something about being creative and feeling as though perhaps you're not supposed to be, or it's transgressive in some way. It's not a grown-up thing to be doing because people may not expect it. It's something that unconsciously you carry around with you, or I have done for years, and have to constantly remember to shake off. And I had a question for Anna and Salena about the beginnings of your collaboration. Anna mentioned that you'd created this piece of music, and then Salena had sent you this poem, and it really resonated with what you'd created. And I wondered, had Salena listened to the piece of music, or had you both been in a similar, no, you hadn't, similar space? Okay.
No, so we wanted to do something together, and Salena just sent me this poem. The first poem, she sent me a poem without hearing any music at all, and actually quite similar to how I put together the music together with the poetry in the film you'll see later on. I kind of as most musicians, we have a drawer, probably writers have it, a drawers of lots of nuggets of ideas that never make it out, or sometimes they kind of come out in different ways or different guises. But when I was listening to her poem, her reciting the poem, I could hear this one piece of music that I knew was stuck somewhere on a hard drive that I'd kind of started and hadn't done anything with, and I could kind of hear them together. So then I sent that back. I put that on top. I worked it around her poetry and her reciting around the audio, and then sent that back to Salena and said, "Does this work for you? How?" And I have to say, Salena is an incredible collaborator in that, or definitely my experience of you as a collaborator, in that it was really interesting to work with someone where you both have your own space and then you have the space between. And it's the idea that, because you can work with collaborators, but actually what they want you to do is jump into their space, or they want to invade your space. And like, actually to work with someone where, I mean, I work with lots of lovely collaborators, that's not the option, but with Salena, it really is this respect. And then also the magic that happens when you meet someone and we're both sort of saying the same thing in different ways. So yeah, it was very organic and feels very easy, the way that we've worked together. Yeah.
Thank you. And I saw Sadaf, you were kind of on the edge of your seat just for a moment there. I don't know if you want to jump in.
Well, I think that this idea of, claiming one's space as a creative artist, and this idea that I think we kind of had, which is a kind of spillover from the 70s, where, there had to be teamwork and women were very, would not put themselves forward. And so maybe I kind of come, a kind of spillover from that generation, plus the fact that I'm in a country like Bangladesh, where it's difficult always to put yourself forward, because women are supposed to be very sacrificing, they're not supposed to be really loud and in your face. So I think claiming a kind of legitimate space for you to be creative and to have your own sense of who you are as an artist, but at the same time using the strength of being able to collaborate, and Anna put it very beautifully, that respecting each other and not kind of swallowing each other up or being subsumed. I think that's such an interesting point.
Well, that's beautifully put. And I think also, obviously, one of the things that's really fascinating about your work, as well as about the work that Anna Phoebe have done, is the kind of genre busting, or this real kind of move that it's not just about collaboration between people, it's about collaboration between art moves, or in your case, it's collaboration between art forms, between molecular biology, between textiles, between everything else. And I wonder again whether you think there's something particularly exciting, perhaps Sadaf, if you would kick us off on this one, and then we can see if anyone else wants to jump in. But if there's something particularly exciting about women's will at this moment to kind of push across some of those more traditional boundaries, is that something that feels kind of particularly current to you?
I think that one thing that I think that this what is connecting with what is happening now is we are right now seeing, I guess the flip side of the internet is that, we're kind of in our echo chambers and in our silos. And I'm kind of connecting that with like everything I see in my life, where, I love biology and the story of biology and how we work and all of that. But of course, I'm deeply embedded in kind of our culture and heritage and our literature and our stories. And I can see this in that everything is very connective and a kind of interdisciplinary look at everything. But I think that that's where I'm finding it kind of coming together for me now, where it's not only my interests are very interdisciplinary, but also we actually need to have conversations with each other, and not within our own kind of specific universes, but it has to be something where we're connecting and we're seeing things from each other's point of view. And I think that also kind of feeds in with what I try and do with my work, whether it's violence against women or other issues that I'm trying to bring out, that I'm not trying to necessarily speak to the converted, but I'm trying to kind of convey something which somebody else will empathize with. And Jasmin was talking about missing a physical space. And that's why I sometimes feel performances or breathing the same air and being in a very intimate space, especially when it's a topic that's very sensitive, that kind of connection, when you're in the same space, that it's not necessarily soundbite is taken out of context. And I think that that's a way that maybe one can really kind of have a human connection. So where, of course, all different types of mediums are important in their own ways. That physical space, I think, is important. I think for a while in Dhaka Lit Fest, we weren't doing live, recordings, or we weren't appearing live, because we felt that we kind of needed that safe space to kind of have conversations which a lot of people weren't comfortable with being taken out of context or being seen out of context. So I think there's a sort of flip side to both things.
Thank you very much. And we've got a couple of questions coming through in the chat. Now, the first one is aimed a little bit at you, Sadaf, but I'm just sort of conscious we want to keep all the conversation flowing. And I wonder if I can broaden out the questions slightly. So the question from Naomi is about the specific challenges to women's creativity in Bangladesh at the moment. But I wonder if on that basis, I could actually invite Salena to come in first, was thinking about questions of the importance of place and the local to your work. Because in one sense, we've kind of had this conversation about these kind of global movements and collaborations and the ability to bring people together. But I also wonder how much the specifics of a particular moment and the specifics of being a woman in a particular place and time matter to each of you as artists and creators.
Well, how long have you got? Okay, so there's so many things I want to say to all of you. Just picking up on some of the things you're saying. I think I'm a bit older than you all, and I started doing poetry in the 90s, and it was all men, and it was, I was often the only woman and often the only woman of color, and never allowed to headline. It always, I had to work. So the sort of 1990s were very much like that. And collaboration was very much part of the poetry scene. And this is all before the internet. And so performing with DJs in like rave and club culture and performing poetry with punk bands and just jumping up. I literally really had to elbow my way through a lot of guys to sort of be heard. And attached to that, there was some strange romanticism. It was kind of romantic to starve and to, and to just be all kind of broke and skint and the struggle. I was convinced the pain and the struggle and the unhappiness that I felt as a young woman would all be good, make good poetry. It would be like, oh, that'll make a good poem. Terrible things that happened to me as a young woman in my 20s. I just used it all as cannon fodder, and just kept blasting my way through. But it took me a long time to sort of, get to a place where you could actually be happy and be creative, and you can be safe and make work. And that took a long time for me to teach myself that I too was allowed to create work, and I didn't need to seek permission, and I didn't need to compete with this sort of male gaze and this kind of thing. And that took a long time to figure out. But my grandmother always was, you're always going to have to work twice as hard for half the money. But I didn't want to accept that, but it was a reality. But I think just one last thing I wanted to say while I was listening to you, I think just being creative and keeping that playfulness is so important. I think one of my greatest successes is that as I approach 50, I am as excited about playing and meeting people and creating as I was when I was 20. And I think that is a great success, to have not, that excitement and that passion hasn't waned. And I think that's really important, because life will really try and knock it out of you, They'll really try and make it as difficult as possible, and the whole paperwork side of it, getting funding is impossible, being heard, getting prizes, being listed. You have to kind of claw your way through all the time. But yeah, keeping that sense of humour and keeping playful with it and enjoying it, it's got to be what it's about. Otherwise, it's just an awful lot of work for not enough smiles. There, that's what I wanted to say.
No, that's amazing. And I suppose it does prompt one little question from me, which is one of the big complaints in academia and universities is that women will often end up doing a lot of certain forms of service work, and we will end up doing a lot of certain kinds of paperwork, and we will end up doing a lot of that kind of labour. And I suppose I wonder, because it's also so inspiring to hear you all talking about supporting one another and about making opportunities and about creativity and collaboration. And I feel like that's the positive side of paperwork, is that it makes something great happen. But I suppose I do wonder as well how much you felt that is one of the challenges that you've faced as women, just having to navigate that landscape as well. I haven't named anyone specific to answer that, so please wave if you want to jump in. But Jasmin, I don't know how much you, or whether you feel you've managed to escape the form filling that kind of besets us so much in contemporary life.
Could you say the question one more time, please?
I suppose it's just a sense of how much you feel that the kind of service labour that women are often asked to engage in, or the kind of bureaucratic work, or the kind of supporting other people work, although it can be tremendously fulfilling, would also count as a challenge to your own work, or is that something you feel you've managed to negotiate reasonably well?
That's so interesting. And as you say that, like, I'm thinking back to being 19 years old and wanting to like plan an open mic night. I wanted to plan like an arts event to bring together poets and artists and filmmakers and all these folks whose work I really, really admire. At that point in my life, like, I didn't even realize that I was a poet. I just really love poetry. So I wanted to bring together artists. And I remember how at the age of 19, we were thinking like, who do we invite to this event? And somehow my whole list was like male artists. And I didn't even consciously realize that we were booking male artists, but that's what we did. We were just like, oh, well, that person's well known and he's like got a, he's got great work and blah, blah, blah. And like, there were female poets who were like, oh, well, maybe this person instead. And what happened was it was just like a list of men, and there were, us two young women organizing everything and handling all the logistics and like coordinating everything to a T. And just having men walk in the very last minute, get on stage, do their thing, get their applause. And like, we were sitting there doing all the labor. And I think that after that event, like, me and my friend just sat there, we were like, like, that was cool, but like, there was something really wrong there. We had to like sit there and think about it. And it was like, wow, we needed to connect with women. Like, we are feminist women and we didn't connect with women. And I think like that's been like my big learning, just in creating space for femme artists and queer artists and women artists to flourish and find those stages when so often it's like the men who we saw as like really developed artists are developed because they've been getting all the opportunities to grow. They've been getting all the stages, and they've been getting all of like the performance time, and it's like those amazing women artists who should have been there as well. We didn't think of them because they've typically not been thought of, and it's just like this disparity that happens consciously and subconsciously, where like those guys get all the opportunities and women are just not given the opportunity. So I think like since then it's been like a decade and things have changed so much, even within my own work and the way I organize, and I'm so happy to have gone on that journey. And going backwards a little bit to Salena's conversation just about like the barriers that women face, and also like the reason why like my womanhood is so deeply tied to the work I do. I think growing up experiencing like patriarchal oppression and patriarchal violence personally was like, it was almost like having like this foot on your neck and needing to stand up and resist it and become a rebel in the process. Because I think that when you experience like patriarchy close up and in your face and personal, and it affects your daily life, rebels are born that way. Like that is how spoken word artists are born, when you just need to say something because you've been told not to say anything for so long. And that's very much like what my life was like. And I think that I wouldn't have become a political spoken word artist if I hadn't been reflecting so deeply on the ways in which I just wanted to feel free in every aspect of my life. And that's really where my whole journey began as a poet. It's just in searching for breath in this art form when I wasn't always given space to breathe inherently the way that I grew up.
Thank you so much. That's an incredible thing to hear about and to think about. And I think it actually kind of starts to answer the question that we had in the Q&A from Caitlin, who's asked how much you feel that being a woman is an important part of your creativity. And I think you've already given us a really fascinating answer to that. But I wonder if I could invite Anna to come back into the conversation as well and think about that sense of how much is this something that feels specific and impacts on your creativity in really particular ways.
Well, I mean, just hearing Jasmin speak, Sadaf, having had that Zoom chat we had about your experience as a writer, Salena, I think I'm in total awe and have so much respect for definitely all the women on this panel, and all the women out in the world who are using their voice and fighting for that space. I grew up working with men for men just most of my career. I feel like the epiphany that you had at age 19, Jasmin, I've only just had age 40, which, you know, to my shame, that I've just kind of gone along because the music industry is very, you know, male dominated. The people at the top are male, white males. You know, I've spent a career pretty much being told when to turn up, what to play, the paycheck comes from so my whole, and I didn't, you know, I was aware of it, but I feel like this last year working with Salena, having a pandemic, which means I'm at home with my family and I have space to create my own work and not be at the beck and call of all the people I work for and have to create my own work because the music industry just collapsed. It was a real privilege because I think for the first time I was able to really look at, you know, my setup, and I think I am a woman of privilege. I'm a white woman living on the Kent coast by the sea. I think that, you know, working with other people who use their strength and their courage and their experiences and are able to share that and put themselves on a platform and speak it out, I have utmost respect. I write instrumental music. I don't use my voice in that way. My music is instrumental, but I hope that with this project that it's a platform to support and communicate the work of others and all those women like you guys here tonight and the ones who've contributed to the piece, who are speaking out, you know, about experiences which are global but have different cultural manifestations or roots. But you know, Sadaf, that Zoom chat we had where I hope you don't mind me saying, but where you said, you know, when I produce a piece of work, I don't know whether, in your words, I'm going to get, you know, targeted and, you know, killed for the piece that I write. I've never had that extent of when I write a piece of music. So I think it's about, you know, it is about global women's issues and supporting the women who don't have a voice, but really just, I'm totally humbled by the fact that you're all willing to voice your experiences and, you know, provide such a inspiration for many women.
Sorry, domestic life is impinging as part of the work of being a woman in the contemporary world. So that's singing in the bath and nothing's going wrong, I promise. But I do want to ask, I suppose, it's a version of Arthur's question in the Q&A there, which is a big question about the importance of creativity in the world today. And so I want to steer it in one particular direction, but feel free to steer it in another and to answer that broader question as well. So mine, I suppose, is to say that many of the contributions to this evening's performance and much of your work in different ways is both extraordinarily beautiful and also often very painful and very challenging, touching on really difficult topics relating directly to women's experience of abuse and sexual violence, among other really difficult things. And I suppose I wonder how you feel you would articulate or think about the role of creativity, perhaps also of collaboration, in changing those kinds of conversation. In a sense, I feel as though we're at a moment when it's become newly permissible again to be kind of very clear about your own political agency as a writer, or a real sense of wanting to make a contribution. And I suppose I wonder how much you see creativity as being something that's going to be crucial to changing some of the conversations that we're having about women's lived experiences and what's happening to women in the world today. I wonder, could I jump to Gianna first to kind of dwell on that question and perhaps to Sadaf to follow?
Is it me or am I getting all the really big questions? Everyone's getting big questions. It just feels like Helen's picking on me tonight. Yes, I think the short answer is yes. I think creativity can allow that. Jasmin talking about how she became a poet and using the term like she was searching for breath, I found really powerful. And I think that creativity can give you that space when the real world or outside of those spaces, you feel as though the air is being taken from you, the breath is being taken from you. I think similar to what Anna was saying about, well, Anna and Salena, about working in collaboration with people. I have worked in theatre collaboratively, and also I write, and writing, I've written a novel and I'm writing a second one, and writing feels like something very lonely, and you go back to something and look at something that you've written, and it's a collaboration with your past selves, and there's something about that which can be energizing but can be extremely draining as well. And I find working in collaboration, particularly with women, actually gives you a lot of energy. The kinds of things that Anna and Salena were talking about the energy they get from each other, realizing that you've both entered a particular creative space and then allowing that to grow and becoming ambitious in a way that isn't competitive. It feeds both of you or all of you and allows something more to be created. And I think together in creative spaces, we can make a space to start a dialogue that often is silenced in other spaces.
Thank you. And Sadaf, I don't know whether you would feel you could follow on, or if there's anything you want to add in there.
I think one, really important thing about using creativity, quite often I'm very involved with the women's movement in Bangladesh, and sometimes I just feel that people become so desensitized, or you see so many statistics, or you just look at the paper, or you see stuff on the TV and you just switch off. I had engaged with a lot of different women from all over Bangladesh. I was involved in this network of women's-led organizations where women from all different generations and different backgrounds. Many of them have probably never come to Dhaka city, and there was such a connection with so many of them. And what we did was we came up with, we collected women's stories, and I wrote these monologues kind of based on the vagina monologues, but not as vagina based, called Je Kotha Jai Na Bola, that which cannot be said. And these were monologues where women were being able to express so many of the emotions and very kind of, I think, sensitive and personal things that, quite often are not shared in a society like this. And, when you're talking about kind of either writing on your own poetry or a novel or something like this, which is a play that's going to be shared in a space live with people, you're very aware of the kind of lens through which your people are going to be taking it, because you're constantly kind of self-censoring yourself to do with your own sexuality, to do with religion, to do with politics. I grew up in a very kind of liberal, supportive background, thinking that I could go out in the world and do everything, and that that being a woman was definitely not going to hold me back. And I can so relate to what Salena was saying, is that, you have to be like twice as good. You kind of really fight your way. And it's been, very, very hard doing so many things in Bangladesh. But I feel that that there is so much passion and joy and curiosity and, wonder out there. So one of the things when we performed this play, first of all, I was kind of terrified after we performed it in Dhaka that, should we take it out to the smaller towns? Will some of these topics be accepted? And some were very, very difficult topics dealing with violence against women, but some were kind of celebrating women and sexuality and older women enjoying their own sexuality, for example, or women loving women. And these are topics that are very sensitive, quote unquote sensitive. And yet it was absolutely extraordinary that when these were performed, there was such an acceptance, because people could see women as humans. And the other extraordinary thing was that we had young women performing who were not actors, but we had taken them from the areas that we were going to perform. And they came up to us and they said that these performances were life-changing for them, because they said the one thing that they knew is that in our lives, if we ever have any problems, we know who we can come and share them with. That there is nothing that cannot be shared with other women. So that meant a lot.
That's incredible, thank you. And I'm going to close, I think, unfortunately. Well, I say unfortunately we have to close. Obviously, it's wonderful because we have Anna's performance to come, so it's exciting to wrap up. But it'd be wonderful also to continue this conversation. But there's two questions there in the chat, and I wonder if each of you could have just the shortest possible kind of one sentence answer to either or both of these questions. So it's either, I suppose, what advice would you give to women creatives who are starting out now, so young women who want to be creators? What would your one piece of advice be? And or a really interesting question there about how we might improve the experience for young women and non-binary creatives for making these kind of spaces available to them in really meaningful ways. I wonder if I could go to Salena first for your kind of nugget of wrapped up advice, which I know is terrible pressure.
Advice from the old sage mountain. I think the main thing is to picture your inspiration as a muscle that needs to be worked every day, and try and, you know, even if you just do like a note in your phone, or just work on it every day. A boxer or a ballerina, or, you know, a gymnast or an athlete, they train every day, and I kind of feel like writers should apply that too, and just sort of touch it every day, even if you just reread something you were working on. Like, I really think it's about that, like building up a kind of muscle. I've often, you know, I often say sort of courage is a muscle, but I think that so is inspiration, and keeping that thing fresh and keeping it going. If you had a stone next to your front door and you rubbed it with your thumb every day for 30 years, in 30 years there would be a thumbprint in stone. And it's like that. You just have to keep rubbing at it, even though you don't notice it growing and changing over the years. Yeah, that's what I say. Thumbprint in stone. Think of it like that.
That's perfect, thank you. Jasmin, and do you have any nuggets for someone to take away?
The advice I give to myself, if I could speak to my younger self, would just be to stop doubting yourself every step of the way. Like, this world teaches us to doubt ourselves as women, and we need to like really try to unlearn that. I think when I was doing my undergrad in creative writing, like, I had started working on this this fictional manuscript, but I did not take my work seriously at that time, because I was like, no one's going to publish me. like that's just never going to happen. So like, why am I like investing so much time in this? And like, here I am with a book now. And if you had told me all those years ago like that would be possible, like, I wouldn't have believed you. And I think that's like just the worst thing ever. Like, I think that we need to be almost reckless in like the faith that we have in ourselves as young women, because this world will teach us every step of the way to not have that faith in ourselves. And beautiful things are possible when you just give yourself a chance, like a tiny little chance, and just see what happens.
Thank you so much. Anna, can I go to you next?
Well, in the music industry, there are changes trying to challenge the patriarchal system, as one of the questions get, you know, how do you challenge? And I think it's about really not always just looking how to manage situations. I think women are very good at, or are good at managing situations, or also friends of mine who are non-binary musicians, you know, they before have tried to fit into classifications which already exist, in terms of a friend who has a choir now, which is non-binary, and, you know, the idea of who sings soprano and who sings is totally goes out the window. These classifications go out the window. And I think it's really exciting that there is a dialogue, and that there are people speaking out. There are people like Jasmin, age 19, creating open mics and going, hang on a minute. And there are people who are providing platforms and pushing for platforms. And I think it's about things like this, a dialogue, and seeking out to surround yourself by women and, you know, and non-binary people to really connect and challenge what's always been just kind of expected. And yeah, so more of this basically.
Giuliano.
I think I would say do what feels urgent. So don't necessarily create what you think will be liked or what is in vogue at that particular moment, but do what feels urgent to you, what feels important to you, and share it with the people you trust when you're ready. That's the main thing.
Thank you. And Sadaf, last but not least.
I would say don't be afraid. So I think delve into what is in you, as Julian said, delve into that, and believe in yourself and you know, go forth with that belief and that passion in you. But at the same time, I think, you know, one of the things that I see all around me all the time is this kind of settling for mediocrity. So I would also say do Shadhana, which is what Salena was sort of saying, hone your craft, push yourself. And a combination of that, I think nobody can stop you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being part of this. So I'm really sorry to have to wrap up, but we are about to enjoy the much anticipated premiere of Anna's specially commissioned composition. And I am delighted to say, as Joan mentioned at the beginning, that the performance you're about to watch weaves in poetry not only from some immensely talented and established poets, but from three of our brilliant students here at York, Bryony Aitchison, Nay Asasa and Chloe Darcy. So on their behalf and on ours as a department, I want to thank Anna for including these vibrant new voices in her extraordinary composition. And on all of our behalf, as I hand back to Joan Concannon, I want to say a huge thanks to our panellists, heartfelt thanks for a really provocative and a richly creative and collaborative discussion. Thank you all so much.
Helen, thank you, and thank you for doing such a fantastic job chairing such an amazing conversation. Anna, Salena, Juliana, Jasmin, Sadaf, thank you so much for sharing your stories and the joy that just emanates from all of you in terms of the work that you do, even when it's difficult and challenging. I loved Selena's analogy of building a muscle for inspiration. I'm taking that away as my kind of festival keep. Space to breathe, space to write, space to create, the power of female collaboration. What have we learned from each other's experiences, elbowing past the male gaze, the energy that we get from each other and from tonight's event, the cruelty of anonymity and the ability for women to help each other heal. That which cannot be said should be said, retaining a sense of playfulness and creating your own thumbprint in stone. I'm so moved. I'm so thrilled. Thank you again. Technical things, watch again, YouTube ideas, please share widely. Fox Lane Books have all of the books relevant from our speakers tonight. Be engaged in the festival, yorkfestivalofideas.com. And I'm going to hand over to the fabulous Anna Phoebe to tell us about the amazing music that she performed at York Minster and the amazing poetry that features as part of that event. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Joan. Thank you so much for hosting us and also, you know, allowing this to happen, and to Helen. So the next 50 minutes is basically music that I wrote as part of my upcoming album, Sea Souls, plus some collaborations with a dear friend, Richard Bundy. It's performed at the incredible York Minster, where we went up for a day. Myself, Clara Schumann on cello, and Richard Bundy on keys and voice. And it's going to start with Horizons, and then the final piece is Beyond Horizons. And between these two instrumental pieces, you're going to hear and see some incredible poetry from not only the panelists, but also some other contributors. We've got the name of Bryony Aitchison, Nay Asasa, Chloe Darcy, and Melissa Rani, and T. Selva, who have also contributed poems. We did this during lockdown, sending files, audio files. So it's all kind of come together for this final piece, and I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much.
And the moon don't talk to me anymore. And starlings swing on the skeletons in a cage, pecking at the fat and the meat and the seed. Through my dirty window, the cherry blossom was always plastic, bought from a fiver from downtown Chinatown. And the moon don't talk to us anymore. And the moon don't talk to me anymore. And my white tablecloth is stained with coffee, which came from a country already in flame, and the moon don't talk to us anymore. She is rising fat and full and furious with a grief, a morning that washes up with the tide after tide, and the tide that rises with the moon, the salt water crashing to the shore, and the moon won't talk to me anymore. And the night is dead and the dark is long, and the rain pours down like the sky's all a river, and the moon don't sing, and the moon won't sing, and the moon don't sing, and the fear spreads and rises and seeps into everything, like a bad smell, like smoke under the door. And the moon don't talk to you anymore, and the moon don't talk to me anymore. You have memories of sleeping in your clothes like a bad dog on the floor. Are these memories or premonitions? You just don't know anymore, because the moon don't talk to you anymore. And the moon hangs heavy, and the sun has turned his back, and all I see is his coat of clouds, and the rain washes decency away. But the sound of the washing machine is a comfort. It's like the sound of the sea from what you remember. From a postcard someone sent you from before, remember? It was stuck on your fridge door. It said, "I wish you were here." And I do. I wish you were here. Because the moon don't talk to us anymore. And the fridge feels safe, so we stock it up good. They say it's safer to get a delivery of groceries. You hope the delivery man washed his hand, cleaned his van, sanitized his face, and has no next of kin. And we buzz on the internet like bees. Oh, we are the lucky ones, aren't we? Hiding at home, locked in our houses, wearing pajamas, boosting the heating. Try not to think of the poor or the elderly, those that aren't safe and those that aren't eating. Think of the food banks, the people in cages, all ages, the kids that needed that one free school meal. Things got real, and all the folk who cannot afford the extra and the bills, the extra food, unpaid time off work, and the extra pills, and the moon ain't shining anymore. Her milky face is clotted with uncertainty, and the gods are all stone cold silent today. The blue sky is a box set you binge in a heat wave, and the hope is at the bottom of a well. There's a hole in my bucket, but I keep turning the handle. Because this too will pass, and nothing is forever. And all pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal than others, speeding off to private jets, to bunkers, and leaving their brothers when they all voted for this mess and more. And the moon won't talk to them anymore, and the moon don't talk to them anymore. And well, we all didn't picture it this way. Hiding at home, making jokes about stockpiling loo rolls and people licking toilet seats. Until you're the last tweet on Twitter. You retweet yourself, yeah? You hum along to an empty fridge. You talk to the washing machine because its face is as round as the moon. Like a dog, you sleep on the floor. Because the moon don't laugh anymore. Because the moon don't talk to me anymore.
Persian rugs. Where does the day start? Is it with a scurry of street cats, at the first press of bare feet, or in the mouth of the morning smoker? There is never an empty street in Cairo. Who can say? Is it me or you? Bikya, 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 Bikya. Here his haulers, between the wails of bleating cars, this young boy calls out for passable things, to stack and then sell off the back of his short truck. A house worth of moving objects behind him, and me watching from the balcony, wanting him to carry me along to the ends of the street market. Is a day first imagined in the clotted veins of this street market? This moment, this space, a mound of sounds and images, bodies, 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 a beaded seam of bodies, woven skirts, big drums of untoasted spices. The street cat rakes its claws down the spine of a Persian rug. I'm spotted by a man roasting corn over a naked flame on the same wooden cart that has been here for millenniums. Time here is a long, sweet stretch of soft molasses, being strung and pulled and strung once again over a metal hook in the wall 3 stalls down. Come and stand for a while. How many and how dark? 4 ears are for 10, but yours only 8, and you could come back to buy from me again. How long will those hands continue to turn, spinning slowly under this thick film of heat between us? Chips of ash scatter into the street cracks as he fans off the smoke that breathes life into his day. Up in this grey flume is the start of his morning. Everyone here, with their own mornings, drifting things, coming to stand at the stalls, forming incredible patterns, heavy textiles of 1,000 different daybreaks. Could I pocket this image, weave it still with thin strands of sunlight that could warm my hands when I move through this new market's frost? Can't the morning promise to stay just as it is? Wait till I come back.
Robin. So here I hop, a body made from biro squiggles, goosebumps and static hairs. Ambiently absent, I stop idly on the wall near breadcrumb fall, calling to nothingness. As light dims, hopping subsides. No crumbs today, she mouths from a window opposite. Smoking, she extends her tongue, tasting evening, unladen by rush hour cries of children in after-school clubs. Still, melancholy inveigles its way behind her eyes, humming. Her sinuses burning 6 a.m. buses, slouching by, ferrying no one nowhere. Bus stops, empty lots, the clock face a forgotten remnant of excess, but from time to time she tastes those ticks on her tongue, down her throat, in her lungs. Black, speckled plastic pieces with waffle sole patterns, trodden into near oblivion. She returns to find me, pecking away at gum stuck firmly to bus stop. According to sources, her bones were brittle. Delicate emotions swathed by bloodied hands and feet. It happened on our street, under lens of day, beneath cold rays and the male gaze. They danced together, under supervision of scouring sky and passers-by, donning half smirks and vacant looks as he lay purple petals against her skin, his stocky body bowering her feminized frame. First the temple, rouging soft flesh of cheek, the nape of neck, before she grew weak. Witnesses tell of how she fell so quickly, like that detracts from the violence, when really she was blown out of existence in the blink of an eye, let die, surrounded by strangers and blue-coated street rangers. So once more into obscurity another is passed, long after the die was formally cast.
The sound of silence. The sound of silence, excruciatingly loud, deafening those who still remember that lilting walk, carefree talk, charming twinkle of askance glance, poignant dignity of stance, carrying her subtle style, an infectious smile, generous with her laughter, as it now echoes in the sound of silence. So beautiful, so young, long, thick, shiny hair, oiled with care to waste, can still taste blood in air, gushing from her throat slashed rare, punctuating flashes pierced those nearby, as visiting nightmares were hid under a silent shroud, never uttered aloud. She fought valiantly as he grabbed her waist down as she tried to break free, found she could not, while he violated her every orifice triumphantly. She was now his. She ran as torn, bloodied scraps fell. As she tripped, that sharp, sharp glint was held against her neck, used with a deliberate intent. She never stopped her screams until they finally died with her. His father, her father's brother, her chacha to bhai, own family and kin, why reveal the shame and sin? Family ranks closed in. Her mother wept till her heart bled and begged when the police came to break it down, the wall of silence. In the bedroom, her mother's plea to her husband that her daughter would not sacrifice her right to justice in death. It was not to be. Preserving face, allowing vicious violation, murder and rape to escape into the sound of silence.
I worry that when you become a toddler, the house will represent everything that isn't who I am and what I stand for. Napkins occupying the wash line, toys of varying significance and forgotten nooks, and the smell of baby permeates every surface. Everything I own will surrender to your existence. Corners of kitchen cabinets will be made blunt. Bathroom mats must be non-slip. I must prevent your dying to achieve my terminal role as a good mother. And when you feel like it, we will go to Tupperware parties and potlucks of mediocre mashed potatoes made by other women and their mothers who told us to bear children. And now, when it is too late, when saliva leaks from your mouth, the aunties will gather. They will cackle at my motherhood and utter the words, "I never said it would be easy." Nothing about you is easy.
The next time you ask me where I'm going, please recall that I am 3 parts indecision and 1 part reckless abandon. That I've seldom bothered to look back at the wreckage I've left in my wake and will never be bothered to master the flames at my fingertips anyways. I am not your poem. I was never your brushstroke. I am not your tragedy or your failed attempts to find meaning. I was never an answer to a question, so when you ask me like dawn if I will rise to your occasion, do not be disappointed when I reply with the dusk. That is all I've ever known. You tell me to take a seat here, on this pedestal that you have carefully constructed only to pull the wooden legs out from beneath my body when my mouth no longer forms the words of your choosing. You tell me to radiate, how to glow beneath the lights and force my chest to rise and fall as my voice rises then crawls to the rhythm of an audience. You tell me to perform for you, to turn my feeling into theater, tear open my chest to inspire, fill all the cracks in my voice with cement because bold women must hide all their human. And I show you all the ocean in my intentions, all the untamed tides beneath my tongue that will swallow you before you ever attempt to master them, all the floodwater that will find its way into your microphone, short-circuit the wiring, burn out the stage lights, and tell you to go home. Our hearts are a bodhi, an echoing chorus of beings too loud to be shaken by the dark. A song bottled in the unbreakable glass of a new world where power does not mean violence and violence does not force us to run from our skin. My mother's bravery is a bodhi, passed down through generations of women who have worn too much patience in their braided hair, on their callus-covered hands, on their exhausted feet. A battle cry that casts away our haunted nights and frees us from the ghosts of trauma at daybreak. My body is a bodhi, a sweet psalm I am still learning how to chant, off-key and flawed at times, but sung loud in the face of power that cannot force me to disappear. Because even if I run out of words, even if I lose my train of thought, even if I tell you the truth only to lose my breath, I am surrounded by women who will pick up where I left off.
Aborted. My pen freezes. with ink pressing longhand on crisp, thick page. Thoughts, sieved through mindful edits, could bring death or its shadow hovering. Words escape, revealing my truths. Will it be that I am teleported to a faraway land where I have no wish to be, exhausted, a struggling migrant community, rebuilding fragments of a life? Through boats, containers, ports, high seas, jetties, danger, camps, bureaucracies, shoved, cordoned, isolated, interrogated, frozen, battered, near drowned, embattled, refused, denied entry and movement, seeking refuge, beggars of abode, or just walk in via that coveted red or blue passport, an immigrant, bearing disintegrated dignities, truncated memories, castrated histories, pouring my potency and strength to this new land where I am pitied, despised, justified, leaving the old betrothed to vultures. As I metamorphose into a statistic, I start anew, or stay and stand for ideals in a battle, perhaps already lost.
Everybody wants to talk about the rape. Everybody wants to talk about how my sari was untied over and over and over again as gods and kings watched lustfully while my body became the tapestry of a failed lineage. 5 hopeless sons lost in battle, 5 lousy husbands lost at a game of dice. Just plain bad luck that I became the inspiration for every Tamil movie sex scene. The poster girl for polygamy, prostitution is permissible if a whore mimics my dressing, sharing sex is acceptable if my name is uttered as an example, just as my wrath is equated to a temperamental storm. I am remembered for all the wrong reasons. because you forget the core of my identity. Before I am goddess, queen, daughter-in-law, common wife, or the raft that saved the drowning Pandavas, I am what you refuse to acknowledge. A woman. But a woman is not a woman until something happens to her, and you want to know what happened to me. Draupadi. Choices. Dharma, karma, whatever you call it, it began with bad choices. In my past life, I was born a queen, successful but single. I was destined to be an unmarried beauty. I prayed to Lord Shiva for a man of 5 elements. He had to be strong, skilled, handsome, honest, and knowledgeable. Shiva laughed. No one man could have all 5 qualities, he said, so he promised me 5 men in my next life, as if one was not enough for me to carry. Now, I'm not saying that men are unnecessary. How can I deny the required essence of conception? I would be a vessel without purpose or direction. So I waited a lifetime for him to arrive, and when he did, it was a competition of disappointment. Men came from east, west, north, and south, made a beeline for my hand, but my heart was set on one and my mind set on another. Karna was my first love, but was of low birth. He was cast aside by my ego, which had been pierced by Arjuna's arrow, who took me home to his mother Kunti and shouted from the front door, "Amma, look what I won in the archery competition." But she did not have the decency to step out of the kitchen. "Whatever it is, share it with your brothers," she said, and that is how I became the present of polyandry, wife of the 5 Pandavas. Till they traded me as a prize with a price for their fragile pride in a game of dice, where the ancient law dictates that being a wife of more than 4, I am now public property.
After the storm, silver trees lunge over a river, tugging a silent highway of twigs and insects seaward. The moon flashes through gaps in the branches, and the weathered frills of fungi adorn the trunks. I peel colourless leaves from my boots and glimpse a boat tucked inside the riverbank. Tender reeds grip its underbelly as ghosts in orange hoist it landwards. Sea trees. Roots rebel against the ebb. The trees are still up to their necks in water. Last night another name bucketed through the town. At the cafe, the window was a seascape. Usually there's a green field just here. Toy boats muttered. It's only 25 feet above the sea, and if it's as bad as they say, of course, we'll be dead by then. I hope that these sea trees, swathed in dark waters, wake them up. Frame and flux. Watch my arms weave across the screen in search of another ridge. Spring onto the harbour wall and run above the mechanical grey waves. On the sand, heads are hooked, pointing beyond the frame. And I remember the gannets, 100 white needles hemming the horizon.
You cussing as the wind coats the speaker with cotton splashes. Wings beat me up the cliff over the flattened grasses. Your film still rolling across a faint and fraying land.
Pink moon. The night is still as April's pink moon rises. In his hot and fevered bed, the powerful and wealthy man, how he believes he sees an angel walking in the soft shoes of a nurse. She holds his life in her tired hands. She works so hard and for so little. She will fill his cup with water. Below the hospital window, moonlight washes the city, and the Thames shimmers in the shadow of Westminster. A homeless teenager shivers with no home to be safe in. But it is in that moment, as he watches her pour water, no longer blind to angels, he'll know the damp fear of sickness as the moon shines bold. How the angel is the nurse, and the hospital is a church. How everything is nothing, and money is nowhere, and your love is here, and your heart is now, and life is a debt you pay back in kind, and your soul is like a wide, hungry mouth, screaming, "Feed me the truth." Now do you see why? The first lesson a disaster teaches us is how fragile this is, and how everything is connected. How we are all one, blood and air, water and bone, with the same supermoon, water and bone, blood and air. How we are all one, how everything is connected, is how fragile this is, and disaster teaches us the first lesson. Now do you see why? Screaming, "Feed me the truth," is like a wide, hungry mouth you pay in kind, and your soul and your heart is now, and life is a debt, money is nowhere, and your love is here. How everything is nothing, and the hospital is a church. How the angel is a nurse, as the moon shines bold. He'll know the damp fear of sickness, no longer blind to angels, as he watches her pour water. And it is in that moment, with no home to be safe in, a homeless teenager shivers in the shadow of Westminster, and the Thames shimmers, moonlight washes the city below the hospital window. She will fill his cup with water. She works so hard and for so little. She holds his life in her tired hands, walking in the soft shoes of a nurse. How he believes he sees an angel, the powerful and wealthy man, in his hot and fevered bed. As April's pink moon rises, the night is still.